Well, I'm still Sandy Beach, and I'm still an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch. And we will see if my memory can get back to wherever I was. I could hardly eat. I was in so much suspense over how this is going to turn out. I think we left it where the fortunes of AA were down the tubes, and things were not looking good, and the Reader's Digest wasn't going to run the article, and they barely scraped through enough money to get the book printed, but when the order went out, nobody bought it, and things were looking pretty bad. When Bill got a phone call from Willard Richardson, and he wanted him to come over and see him at the Rockefeller office. So he went over to see him, and he said, Mr. Rockefeller has been following this organization very closely all these years. He's been watching what you've been doing, and he thinks it's wonderful. And he wants to throw a dinner on behalf of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was now Alcoholics Anonymous since the big book had been printed, and the name was taken of AA. And he said he wants to make this a very formal dinner, and he's going to invite all of the big shots in New York City to come to the dinner. And Bill looked over the list of the people who had been invited, and his computer-like mind calculated that there was at least $2 billion being invited to this dinner. He still hadn't given up on the big bucks. There was the head of the Chase Manhattan. There was the head of all the banks, the big churches, the big engineering corporations, Wendell Willkie, names like that. And so he said, wow, this is wonderful. So they got all of the, as many of the drunks they could. Dr. Bob was there, and Dr. Silkworth, and Harry Emerson Fosdick. And at each table they put one of the drunks, along with the celebrities that were assembled there. And the guests were kind of nervous at first. They thought it must be some sort of a prohibition thing that they were being invited to. They didn't know what Alcoholics Anonymous was. But as they settled in with the drunk at each table, things started lightening up a little bit. And Ryan, who was the Irishman that we told you about that was on the Gabriel Heater show, was at one table. And they said to him, the banker said to him, well, Mr. Ryan, we assume you're in the banking business. And he said, no, sir, I just got out of Greystone Sanitarium 2 weeks ago, and I'm trying to sober up. And so they laughed at his candor and started relaxing and had a nice dinner. Dinner was over, and turns out that John D. Rockefeller couldn't attend because he was sick, so he sent his son, Nelson Rockefeller, in his place. And he got up and he said, the reason we've invited all of you here, and of course one of the main reasons was that this was going to be covered in every paper in the world. I mean, the New York Times, everywhere they wrote the story of John D. Rockefeller throwing this dinner, and some of the stories said, what's wrong with Rockefeller that he's throwing a dinner for a bunch of drunks? You know what I mean? It was like, what is this? Anyway, Nelson Rockefeller got up and said he's so sorry that his father is so sorry that he can't attend, but he's very, very sick. But he wanted everyone here, all the guests, to understand what this organization was and what it had accomplished and how happy he was to know about it and to have a small part in it because it was doing so much good in the country, and that this was, in fact, one of the great social movements. And at that point he said, it is a labor of love and needs no money. And Bill sat there at the dinner and watched the $2 billion go out the window. And the papers gave it a very fine coverage. And shortly after the dinner, Mr. Rockefeller contacted AA and said, I want to send a big book to all the people who attended the dinner and all the people who were invited who didn't attend. So he sold, I think it was 400 books or 300 books to Mr. Rockefeller for $1 a piece. It was the cheapest they ever sold the books. And there was a personal letter signed by Mr. Rockefeller to every one of the people who had attended, telling them again about what AA was and what it was accomplishing, and indicating that they were still suffering from a small financial problem, and that he, John D. Rockefeller, was going to donate $1,000, and anything they could donate would be greatly appreciated. Well, the guy would get the letter. He was a millionaire, and he looked and saw that Rockefeller was a multimillionaire, and he said, let's see, a multimillionaire gave 1,000, I'm just a millionaire, I'll give 10. So he'd mail in $10. Some of them mailed in $100. And I think out of the total thing, they got about $3,000 or $4,000, which was desperately needed. And each year thereafter, for the next 3 years, they solicited the same list of people and got about the same amount, like 3,000 or 4,000. And during that period, the Liberty Magazine article had gone and brought in some publicity. And then the Saturday Evening Post with Jack Alexander, the main story. Jack Alexander was sort of an expose artist, and he went around finding things and then exposing them for what they really were. And so his editors told him, hey, there's this AA thing. He said, don't worry, I'll find out what the real scoop is. You can rest assured that I will expose AA for what it really is. So he came in and went to meetings and just, did everything. And he said, my God, this is wonderful. There wasn't anything there was no thing. So he just became a convert and wrote this powerful story about AA that was so compelling. And after his article was written, there were many requests for the big book, many requests to get sober, and AA was really off and running. And the groups had started sending money into the central office, and AA was functioning. And so Bill wrote a letter to John D. Rockefeller and said, we won't be soliciting any more money. AA is on its own, and we will never again need outside contributions. And AA was off and running. Now, I said I was going to mention Clarence Snyder, and the reason I'm doing it is for my own conscience, because Clarence was down in Florida when he passed away, and so I knew a lot of people in Florida who knew him, and I knew just a little bit about him. He was one of the original AA members in Cleveland, Ohio, and got sober Dr. Bob was his sponsor. And I only knew just very sketchy little facts about him, and I had a great resentment against him. I said, man, this guy is awful. He's just terrible. And the resentment that I had was that there would be newspaper stories saying that Clarence started AA. And he would let it stand that way. Yeah, that's right, I started AA. I did. And he liked to get his name in the paper, liked to break his anonymity. And so I just felt, this guy's done more damn damage to AA than good, until I read this book 3 or 4 times. And I'm just going to tell you a few stories about him, and then we'll move into the steps, just to clear the air in my own mind. He was a down-and-out drunk out of Cleveland, really bad, and was drunk in New York. And his doctor knew of Leonard Strong. Oddly, that name, Bill's brother-in-law, would come in here. And Leonard referred his doctor to Dr. Smith in Akron, Ohio, to Bob Smith, and said, that's the guy to send Clarence to if you want to get any help at all. So Clarence went out to Akron, met Dr. Bob, and Dr. Bob said, come on in the hospital. I'm going to send you through my little treatment thing here. And when you get out, you can attend the Oxford meeting here at the Williams home. And that'll be your mainstay, but your main job is to go back to Cleveland and start getting alcoholics sobered up. And back then, first you got sponsored, then you went off and you found somebody to sponsor. And until you showed up with somebody to sponsor, you really weren't a member yet. That was your test, was to go out and find an alcoholic and bring him in and sponsor him and get him on his way. And so Clarence when he sobered up, he became a dynamo. I mean, he was unbelievable. He went back to work as a salesman with the automobile company. He sold so many cars, he was their champion. As a matter of fact, they gave him a demonstrator. So now he had his own car to drive people down to Akron and to the meetings. And then he got so good at selling cars, they gave him a second demonstrator of a different line of cars that they were carrying, so he could haul 10 people down to Akron in the 2 cars. And he set about going out and finding alcoholics to sober up like nobody ever saw. And he ended up with 10 guys. There was only one meeting a week. So you had to drive down from Cleveland to Akron. You attended the meeting, and then you went back. And during the week, you had lunch, or you talked to each other, you did whatever, but there was only one meeting to go to. Oddly enough, out of this group of 10, he had 8 Catholics. The Catholics were starting to take over, finally, in AA. He had 10 Catholic guys, and 8 out of the 10 he's bringing down to Akron. Now, these guys got sober, and their lives changed. And so their parish priests were coming up to them, and they're going, "Pat, what's going on, man? You look wonderful." He said, "I'm sober, Father. I'm just so thrilled." "Well, how are you doing it?" "Well, they got this thing down in Akron. I went down. There's this doctor down there. He helped me through the hospital, and then we attend a meeting." "Oh, what's the meeting, Pat?" "Well, it's the Oxford group." The Oxford group was on the Catholic Church's S list. This was verboten. You do not attend Oxford group meetings and stay in the Catholic Church. And so they started pressuring, "Pat, you can't keep going to those Oxfords. That's Protestants. And the Catholics, we can't have that." And so Clarence is going, "Man, this is a terrible conflict, because if they stop going there, they're going to get drunk. You know what I mean? If they keep going here, they're going to be excommunicated from the Catholic Church." And some of the priests finally said, "If you keep going there, we're going to excommunicate you." So Clarence came up to Dr. Bob and he said, "Dr. Bob, we got to do something for these Catholics. We got to start a meeting separate from the Oxford meeting." And Dr. Bob said, No, we can't do that." That was before he changed his mind. But when he first said that, "No, we can't do that." "Well, what am I going to do?" So he's back in Cleveland. He's talking to somebody about it, and it was a guy he had taken down to treatment, and his wife, and they were well-to-do. And she said, "I'd be glad to loan you my house for a meeting." And he said, "By God, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get these Catholic guys a separate meeting." So he came back down, he told Dr. Bob, and he told the whole Oxford group. He said, "I'm starting a meeting next week. We're going to follow these same principles, but it's not going to be an Oxford meeting. We're just going to meet in this house." No, you can't do that. It'll ruin everything. "We're doing it tomorrow night." So the next night in Cleveland, they're starting their meeting, and all the guys, including Dr. Bob, come up from Akron to try and break it up. Try and stop this thing from happening. "We can't have you start." We're going to do it. And this meeting, the big book had come out when this meeting was started. And so he just said, "We're going to call it AA after the big book. That's the name of our little group." And he was the first one to call his group AA. And so he did start the first, quote, AA meeting anywhere. There was a group in New York that wasn't meeting with Oxford, but I think they called it the Drunk Squad. You know what I mean? And so then he went on, he started an intergroup up there, first intergroup anywhere. This guy was so organized, it was unbelievable. He wrote literature about how to be a sponsor. He wrote literature on how to take AA into prisons, how to deal with institutions. It looked like General Service Office. I mean, it was unbelievable, the amount that came out. And his vision of AA's future was there wouldn't be a central office. Every major city would have an intergroup office, and it would write pamphlets, and it would, publish whatever was needed for its AA groups, and they didn't need a central dictator in New York, as they saw it back then, telling them what to do. So there was a conflict about how the structure of AA should be. And there was the feeling that Bill was becoming a dictator and was going to, it was misguided, but there was that feeling that, he just wants to run the whole thing from New York. And so Clarence, he really was, but he was, Nell Wing was, Ruth Houck was Bill's first secretary, and she wrote about Clarence. She said the following: he had the most abrasive personality in the world. It was his way or nothing. He said if he didn't have such an abrasive personality, he would have been the tri-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. He would have just been included with Dr. Bob and Bill, and as history unfolded. But he was so obstinate and so abrasive. Like when he went to the Rockefeller dinner, he was sitting with Dr. Bob, and when they introduced about AA, they made this big fuss about Bill, and they didn't say hardly anything about Dr. Bob. And Clarence was on his way to the head table to straighten this out. You know what I mean? What the hell are you talking about Bill Wilson all the time? You didn't even make... And Dr. Bob grabbed him and sat him down. Clarence, relax, for crying out loud. Bill likes all that. I don't. Relax. Jeez. And so with that personality, he just went on. And so as it evolved the way it did, he just became a separate force and organized retreats and did all that. But the higher power was always Jesus. And so that was a controversy that he had. And so he ran retreats until he died. He had AA retreats, and there was the big book and the Bible were side by side. And as we know now, and so his intentions were unbelievable, and the number of drunks that he sobered up. I'll tell you one quick story. He would sober him up out of Skid Row. And he would go down there, and he could talk. He could out-talk anybody. And he would just go, blah, 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 and then finally they'd go, okay, I'll go. And he hadn't been able to find anybody in a couple of weeks, and he came across a guy with alcoholic paralysis. You don't hear about this much anymore, but alcohol paralysis is you can't move your body, but you're conscious. You can talk, but you can't move anything in your body. And he found a guy with alcohol paralysis. He said, this was perfect. Because he could talk to him, and the guy couldn't leave. You know what I mean? And so he was talking to this guy, blah, 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 hey, they're going to get you, so come on, I can get you. And the guy's just going, oh, God, help me, God, help me. He said, all right, okay, I'll try it. And he said, well, how much money have you got? He said, well, I only got about $10. He says, well, we need 50. It costs $50 to go through Dr. Bob's down in Akron, and you had to go through there in order to get started. That was the way they had. So we got to get $50. He said, if my mother knew about this, she would give us the 50. Well, where's your mother? This is Clarence. Where's your mother? Well, she's about 50 miles out here out in a farm. Well, give me the address. Tell me how to get there. So he gets the directions. Immediately, just leaves the guy there, gets up, borrows a car, and drives out following these directions to this farm. Well, he gets out, the regular road ends, then the dirt road ends, and now he's on like a trail trying to find this farmhouse. Hunting season has started out there. There's guns going off all around him, And he's going, I don't know if I should keep on this trip or not, but he does. And he finally gets to the farmhouse, goes up to the door, knocks on the door, and a little old lady comes to the door, and he's explaining. Your son, and she's shaking her head, like this. And he goes on, he talks for like 20 minutes. He suddenly realized she doesn't speak English. She only speaks Polish. And he's just going, what am I going to do now when a little girl comes out, about 8 years old, who's attending American school, and she has picked up enough English so that she can serve as a translator between Clarence and this guy's mother. And as he's telling the girl, well, your brother, Bill, and whatever it was, and the mother's eyes light up, she runs back in, gets $50 of the old great big dollars, and wants to give him even more if you're going to get my son sober. And he came back, took him in a car down to Akron, and the guy never had another drink. I mean, just that was his personality, was he just went out. So he was a wonderful driving force, and in his own way saved an awful lot of alcoholics. So I want to just get that little word in about Clarence, and we'll move on now. That's about it out of the history. And we're going to start now talking about the steps. If those of you that are new, I'm sure you know what the steps are. They are the plan for living that AA offers you to replace your plan. And as my sponsor suggested to me, we ought to replace your plan because it sucks. Because your plan got you where you are today. And it was very hard. I was wearing a wristband from a nut ward, and I'm trying to explain that my philosophy of life and my ideas about life are quite superior to his. And he's going, you know, people just don't want to listen to anybody with a wristband from a nut ward. And, you know, it was like... So AA is very result-oriented. Your plan, look in the mirror. That's what your plan has produced. Now look at AA. Look at the people here. Look around you. Listen to their stories. And you find that there's tremendous results as a result of these 12 steps. And so that, on that basis, it becomes a program of attraction. You should try these steps as a plan to replace your plan. And the steps, which Bill writes about in the 12 and 12, in the foreword says, these steps are a group of principles, spiritual in nature, which if practiced as a way of life will do two things. One, they'll expel the obsession to drink. And two, they'll enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. That's it. That's what the steps are for. Get rid of the obsession to drink and to bring happiness and usefulness into your life. That's what the deal is. If you're willing to try these steps, the obsession to drink will go away, and you will become a happily and useful person. That's the deal. And so I remember seeing that, and I remember looking at the steps, and like I told you earlier, I didn't see any money in there. I looked up and down and said, these steps will help every problem you have. And I'm looking in there, I don't see a job step, I don't see straighten your marriage out step, I don't see... The money step was the big one. I just kept looking for that money step. Because when you're broke, you know that money is the only answer. And it wasn't there. So, no matter how hard you study the steps, they won't make any sense. Because they're spiritual. And spiritual things only become visible after you do them. Then you see it becomes clear as a bell what they are. So it doesn't do much good to just study them. You can look at them. We're going to talk about them, and maybe we can make them attractive. Maybe we can make them sound like fun. But it's in the doing that your believing comes in. And then you get the results, and then it starts happening. And so when I look at these steps, I just see a way of being guided through life with a reassurance that something very powerful is on my side. What I think the steps do is they open up a line of communication with a power that exists inside of us that can reassure us that everything's all right no matter what's going on out here. And to me, that's worth millions, to have access to something like that. And it all starts out with what I read earlier, with understanding the nature of our present situation. You have an illness which only a spiritual experience can conquer. It's a very bizarre illness. What is that? An illness that only a spiritual must be a very powerful disease. Well, alcohol is. It's incredibly powerful. And so in order to make a start on it, we have that first step. We have to say we're powerless. And a lot of people, when they think about powerlessness, miss the boat in understanding what that means. When we first come to AA, we think this is what it means. It means, this isn't what it means, but this is what we think. We think it means, you know, whenever you take a drink, you put yourself in jeopardy. You have no idea what's going to happen. If you take one drink, all of a sudden you're taking 10. Then you get arrested, and all these horrible things happen if you take a drink. So your powerlessness appears to happen when you drink. But that's not it at all. That's hardly a problem. If the only problem that you have in life is whenever you drink, your life gets all screwed up, then that problem would be solved by not drinking. It would be just like having an allergy, a food allergy. And you don't know what it is, but every so often when you're in a restaurant, you eat something and it gets you all screwed up. You can't breathe, you're choking, your skin gets all red, and you're just going, oh, God, if I could only find out what it is. So you go to the doctor, they finally do enough tests, and you know what they found out? It was strawberries. All you have to do in order to be well is not eat strawberries. You know what I'm saying? And you are so happy to find this out. So you go to a party and they say, hey, you want some strawberry shortcake? And you say, no, I don't want any strawberry shortcake. And you go somewhere else and they say, hey, we got some strawberry ice cream. You want it? No, I don't want any strawberry ice cream. And you just don't eat that. And it's wonderful. You don't go to meetings with other people who can't eat strawberries and talk to them about how they didn't have a strawberry today. You don't have a sponsor who's talking to you about, well, are you thinking about strawberries or are you thinking about that? So that's not the problem, that when you drink, your life gets all screwed up. That's not it at all. See, our problem occurs when there's no alcohol in our system. That's where the disease gets us. Because you know what happens when you don't drink? I know what happens when I don't drink. You're sober all the time. You're sober all day long. And then you're sober all night long. And then you're sober all week long. And then part of you is going, how long is this going to go on? I need a break from this. What do you need a break from? I need a break from being sober. Well, what's wrong with being sober? What's wrong with being sober? It's painful to be sober. That's why I drink. I drink to get unsober. I can't stand it when I'm sober. What's the problem? Well, I'm nervous. I don't fit in. I don't feel good. I don't like it. And alcohol fixes it. So alcohol fixes a problem that's there without alcohol. That's what alcoholism is. You see, for a non-alcoholic, when they drink, it doesn't fix anything. They just drink. And then sometimes they don't even finish the drink. They just put it down. And you look at them and you go, what's wrong? Don't you understand? Why aren't you drinking that? It's because it's not fixing anything like it does for us. That's why we're alcoholics. Alcohol does something magic for us that it doesn't do for the non-alcoholic. So when you tell an alcoholic not to drink, he just goes, you don't understand. Because he knows if he doesn't drink, he's going to be sober all the time. Forever. He's going to be in this much pain forever. See, that's why I drank, was to get out of being sober. I didn't say that, but when I went up to the bar, I was really saying, bartender, I don't know how the hell it happened, but I'm sober again. Have you got something back there that can help a guy with this desperate problem that I have? I'm totally sober, and it's freaking me out.